Welcome to Life Decoded. Today I have a Marine veteran and counselor with me, Jerry Clark. Thank you so much for taking your time.
Thank you, Mo. Looking forward to this.
So, I heard about you a while ago and now we finally meet, and I never had someone here who was actually at the army or was doing something for the Marine life from nowhere. So maybe you want to tell me how that was for you, how you got into it, first of all. And yeah.
Sure. Growing up, Mo, I was always playing Army, reading Sergeant York comic books and watching any kind of Army shows I could watch. So I was very enthused with the military. And after I graduated high school, I spent a year in college, and I had 3 friends that were joining the Marines, and they wanted me to go with them. And so I signed up, and we all 4 of us went to boot camp together. It was quite an experience for me, because the platoon honor man is the best man in the platoon, and I graduated as platoon honor man and received a promotion. I think there were about 80 in my platoon. And so I had to excel in a lot of things, and that was just the way I wanted to do it. The military was so important to me, and I just loved the Marines. And so I wanted to excel, and I started out that way. So once I graduated, I went into infantry training, and then we went into another kind of training that had to do with jungle warfare. And I joined in August, well, it was in January of 1966, a long time ago. In August of 66, I landed in Vietnam, and I served with the 1st Battalion, 3rd Marines, which was a special landing force. We operated off a helicopter ship, went inland, and pulled our operations that way. And I spent 13 months and 11 days in that country, and I came home a real mess. I was struggling in a lot of ways with PTSD, didn't have a clue that I had it, but it really impacted my life drastically.
Wow. Okay, so you grew up with this glorification of the Army, with Top Gun and all those great films. I don't know if they were big then there, but like today as well, the Army has a very, very glorious prestige, at least in Germany. And of course, it's a very honorable thing to do as well. And then you served for 13 months in a war in Vietnam and came back with PTSD. What is now your perspective on the Army?
Well, I still love the military. I think it's very necessary, as sad as that is, but a powerful military, I feel like, is keeps us safe. And as a veteran, I support the military in a lot of ways, and I think just being a proud vet is very meaningful to me.
Mm-hmm. So I guess you learned a lot over the course of your apprenticeship and everything, of course, everything leading up to your first deployment. What were the key things they taught you? What is the key things you learn when you go to the military?
Well, I think survival is a key thing. And I had amazing instructions. I spent about 7 months in intense training, and the idea was to, come home and be sure my buddies came home too. So training together, we really learned to work as a unit. I think control was a big thing that I learned. Self-control was so important that it helped me come home, because when things got tough, I knew what to do, and my buddies knew what to do, and so the control part is what messed me up when I got out of the military. I felt like I was trained highly trained and was very successful in my mission in Vietnam. But I wouldn't want to go back. I didn't have to take a second tour because it was time for me to get out. And I was certainly glad because it was rough. And, one of the big things that I really noticed, Mo, was it caused my parents and my family at home. I was not married. It caused them to suffer greatly because they had no clue what I was doing or where I was, or they worried every day and every night. When I came home, I wanted to be the best dad and the best husband ever, but I was so poorly equipped. When I got married, we had 2 sons, and over about 3 years, and I kind of put them through boot camp, wanting them to be top-notch young men, brave, strong, clean cut, the whole 9 yards. And I didn't know how to be a dad. I just knew how to control circumstances and people, and it caused my relationship and my marriage to fail after 13 years. And I could not understand what that was all about because, what I learned in the military, and, it kept me alive, and I just couldn't understand how other people couldn't see that me being in control was the right thing. But what I learned is if I'm in control, the ones I love feel controlled. And if I'm right, they feel wrong. And I couldn't see that concept for many, many years. But I put them through some grueling times, unknowingly.
Because it was just everything you knew.
Exactly.
As a young man, you joined the army, and then it was just your whole life here. Understandable. But did there ever a moment in Vietnam occur where you nearly died?
Yes. Too many moments.
Too many? Okay, over the course of 30 months.
Yes. Yeah. I participated in about 15 search and destroy operations, and those were just to go in and find the enemy and root them out and do what we needed to do with them. So, but I was very fortunate not to be even wounded. I lost too many buddies, and I couldn't understand why them and not me. That was a big question. And coming home, I had survivor's guilt. Why did I make it and they didn't? And that's very troubling. It was very troubling for me for a long time.
How did you cope, or how did you overcome this question? Why them? And
well, the thing, I felt so fortunate that I made it back, that I wanted to see what I could do to give back to other people, and it really fell into my lap about 13 years ago now, where I formed a group called Transition Plus to help veterans coming out of the military to transition into civilian life, because it's such a huge contrast, and I mean, there's just so much order and so many things that you're taught how to do, and it just works so rhythmically. But you get out of the service, and there's all kinds of things that open up, and there's not necessarily the right way to do things. You have to make a lot of choices, and a lot of times those choices are not good because I wasn't trained. I wasn't trained to be a dad. I wasn't trained to be a husband. And so the choices I made, they weren't very good ones.
So nowadays, would you say you learned how to cope with the real life? And if so, how did you manage to do it, and how long did it take you?
Well, it's been a journey, Mo.
Okay.
Not long after I divorced, a couple of years after I divorced, Connie and I married, and we've been married for 41 years now. And
wow, congratulations!
Thank you. Yeah, it's been quite a journey, but early on, the relationship went south like my first one did, and so we went to counseling to really see what we could do to make our relationship work. and
Mhm.
she was in a women's group, and I was in a men's group, and then we were in a couples group together. And the women in that couples group didn't like me, Mo. They call me Mr. Right, Mr. Perfect, Mr. Know-It-All, Mr. Controller, and needless to say, I didn't like them either.
Yeah, I can understand.
I didn't tell them that, but I did feel that way. But the miracle of that whole thing, Mo, had to do with they taught me that I was a controller. They taught me that I had to be perfect. They taught me all of these things that I could not see myself, and it was a real learning experience. I stayed in that group. Connie and I were in that group for quite some time, and maybe, I don't know, 9 months or so. But that's where the transition for me happened. And I learned a magic word, surrender, which going through the Marine Corps, that was a word that I would never face. In fact, that was the horror that I had to be captured. I just don't know that I could have been captured. Anyway, I learned to surrender and win. And in relationships, when I, yield, and when I give someone else their point of view and their ideas, it makes them feel good and it makes me feel good. And so that was a real transition point for me to be able to surrender and win.
Wow. So when I imagine that, you always only knew to win, no matter the cost, of course. And then you come into a relationship, and of course, you still are driven to win every argument, so have everything your way, in quotes. So it's a bit like stubbornness, right? Could you describe it
Well,
like that you needed to give up for a better relationship?
For example, with my sons, I would be doing some work in the garage, maybe building something, and I would get them to come out and help, and they never could do it right. If they were cutting a board, they didn't cut it right, or they were hammering a nail or putting in a screw. They just didn't do it fast enough and right. And so I would get on to them, and finally they just quit coming out to do any work. And the same with mowing the yard. I would have them mow the yard, but they just make a mess out of it. They loop strips, and I'd be out there finishing up mowing the yard, mad, but I mean, that's just kind of an example of how I was. I just didn't know what the heck I was doing, and I wasn't teaching them anything other than to follow my steps, which Lord knows I didn't want them to follow those kind of steps.
I can imagine how hard it must have been on your relationship with your sons. Did that heal over the last few years?
Yes, it did. My oldest son and I had the most problems. And when we divorced, he came to live with me. And things didn't get better for quite some time, Mo. But now he is grown with a family, and I just got off the phone with him. I probably talk to him 5 or 6 times a week, and we get together every weekend. And my other son lives in the Dallas area. I'm in the Houston area, and I talk to him probably the same 5 or 6 times a week. And we don't just talk about the weather or fishing. We talk about, family problems and things that are going on that they're concerned with about their house, their jobs, the economy. So it has really transitioned into something that I feel proud of.
Okay, so your whole life circulated around helping others the best way you know. So first there was the Marine, the Army, helping in the war, and then the thing with the transitions from the veterans that you're helping to establish. And now you are also a counselor for quite some years. What are you doing in that job?
Well, my education is in marriage and family therapy. And so I see families, individuals, couples, teenagers, children. I see children with their parents, but I see the whole, the about everything that there is to see in counseling. And I love it. And I have that Transition Plus group every Thursday night, which is really one of the things I feel like is giving back, because I'm helping veterans, transition out of the military into civilian life. And a lot of these veterans that come to that group are as old as I am. They suffered with alcohol problems, trouble with the law, drugs, marital issues, and those kind of things. And so it's really been an amazing thing to be able to give back to the community of veterans that I care so much about.
Wow, that is just so inspiring, to be quite honest with you. So, what were the hardest jobs in counseling? Do you have any story that comes directly into your mind where I say hard?
I call them jury clerks. When a guy comes in here and he can't listen, he won't hear, he just thinks that his way is the best way, and is not open for any kind of opportunity to even address or attempt to try to change. And I think that's the hardest thing that I want so much for the people I see, because I know what suffering is like. I know what suffering in families and relationships is like. And when I see someone that's doing something that's totally damaging to what they're all about and can't reach them, it's a little frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that comes to mind has to do with suicide. And I've talked to way too many people who promised me they wouldn't take their life, but did. And that's a real tragedy to deal with. I've talked to people who've attempted suicide and didn't make it, and the freedom that they feel and the gratefulness that they feel that what they were trying to do didn't work, really lets me know that suicide is just something that someone is struggling with so badly they can't see any other outcome, and the only thing to relieve the pain is to take their life, even though they know that they have families that they're leaving. But it's just hard to imagine that someone could hurt that much to check out on life as I've seen him do.
So for so many years, no suffering from firsthand, and now you also saw it and in many, many people, many relationships. So it's just a disease everywhere around the globe. Everybody has some hard times on themselves. Besides trying less to be stubborn, do you have any other things someone could do to improve their perception of life right now, if they're suffering from a hard message or hard things that just happen in life, like to everybody else?
I call it inversion therapy, where we look at something that's perhaps counterintuitive to what's normal for a person. I was just talking to a lady last week who lost her husband about 5 months ago, and she is just down and out. And she says, "I'm sad, I'm lonely, I'm hurting, I don't have anything to live for." And I think it's that kind of conversation that we keep going in our head that keeps us plummeting. And we began to talk about what she did have to live for. And instead of saying, "I'm sad," could she say that I used to be sad, and now I'm wanting to live for my grandkids and my kids. And as we talked about these things that were totally opposite of what our thinking and self-conversation was, she began to smile and say, "I had never thought about that. I just was giving my thinking away to, I was giving my freedom away to my thinking, which was, I'm hurting, I'm sad, and I should be grieving because I lost, the man I loved and lived with for 50 years. But it's about turning things around. Jim Rohn talks about turning frustration into fascination. And that's another inversion. And instead of me getting frustrated at someone driving crazy, I can get fascinated and even have fun with myself, trying to make up stories about what's causing this person to drive that way. And surely they're in more of a hurry than I am. Let me back away and give them, room. Maybe I can help them get to where they're going without them crashing into me. So it's just things like that are opposite of what it's like, turning my control over to surrender. And it's those little things like that seem to be nuggets to help people get out of those trenches that just weigh them down. People that struggle with their marriages or with their kids, and a lot of people do. Just the opportunity to offer them a new way of thinking that makes a tremendous difference. There's another example I have, Mo, if you don't mind, of I've learned that the anxious mind trumps the intellectual mind. The more anxious I am, the less intellectual I am. The more intellectual I am, the less anxious. And when they're balanced, I'm whole, because I need my anxious thoughts, and I also need my logical thoughts, because my emotions are very important and I can't discount them. But one of the things that I've learned, and it's an amazing thing to watch, if someone is in my office and they're angry, maybe they're talking to their wife in a harsh tone, I ask them to sit on the floor, and I sit down on the floor with them. Most of the time they're like, I don't want to sit on the dang floor, and I just go sit on the floor and invite them to come down. But when I do, what happens is they subordinate themselves to this person. When they're anxious, I say they're in the reptilian brain, the fight or flight mode. And generally when they're in that mode, it's not to flee, it's to win the fight. But I wish I could videotape it, because what I see when they lower their anxiety, or they lower their eye level rather, and they surrender, and the voice, the amplitude of the voice comes way down, the context of the conversation begins to be calming and intellectual, as opposed to just yelling and fussing. And before you know it, that whole situation has just collapsed as far as the anxiousness goes. But it's fun to watch that. It doesn't happen very frequently, but when it does, it's amazing. And I invite people, when they learn that technique, and sometimes we don't have to get on the floor to do that, but when they learn that technique, if the one person's standing, the other person sits down. If this person is sitting, this person sits on the floor. And it is an amazing inversion of what's happening from an anxious standpoint.
Okay, so through immersion or another perspective, you gain a greater intellectual mind that you can use better for your outcome. If there would be one thing you could change in the world for everybody, a rule or a circumstance that some people have to endure, what would it be?
I would say get good feedback and listen to it and employ it, because it's the feedback that we don't take interest to. We don't so much of the time, and I never like to hear anything negative about myself. If someone were to say, Jerry, you talk too much, or you think you're a know-it-all, I would say, no, I'm not. No, I don't. And I would discount that feedback. But if I were to hear that today, I would say, help me understand that. What else can you tell me about that? I appreciate it when you spot these things that I don't see. I call them blind spots. In fact, I don't know that I told you, but I wrote a book about it, Blind Spots in Relationships. What I don't know about myself. And that to me is the key to communications. It's the key to relationships, whether it's in business, neighbors, or families, to be able to listen and hear good feedback and employ it in such a way that you make the changes you need to make to keep closeness as opposed to create distance.
Thank you so much. Where can people get to know you a bit better or even get your book?
I have a webpage. It's jerrydclark.com, jerrydclark.com. And on that webpage, I have a bunch of information where you can contact me on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And the book is on there too, where you can purchase the book. I think that's the best way. I have an email address, but the best way is to get my website, which is jerrydclark.com.
Thank you so much for giving us all an insight into your very, very interesting life and all the phases of it. Thank you so much for your time.
You're so welcome, Mo. Thank you.